Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. It's great to see you all. So people are starting to join us here on our webinar this afternoon. So if you would take a moment to just welcome, to just share your name, your role, and where you are joining us from, so we can kind of get to know who's in the room and make some connections with fellow colleagues. It's great to see so many familiar faces. Michael, I'm so excited for our podcast tomorrow night with you
I,
and Nick.
we cannot wait. We are so excited and we are just really pumped. So thank you for the opportunity. It's great to
Yes,
see you and everyone here today too.
it's going to be high energy and fun. I just heard from Arvin, so he's excited too. So
Awesome.
excellent. Hi, Danielle, Roberta. It's good to see you again, both of you. Scott and Dan, great to see both of you. Joanna, and you're joining from Germany, it looks like. What time is it?
Yes, it's already evening time. It's like 8 o'clock in the evening right now. And I found you through LinkedIn, and I'm really excited. I think you're doing some great stuff, and we need to push for AI in education. So yes, thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. Hi, Stuart. Katie. Well, welcome everyone. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We've got an amazing webinar planned for everyone today. And I think as more people join, we'll welcome them to the conversation as we really explore the intelligence era and how digital portfolios can be used to measure what AI can't. And I am just thrilled to be hosting this very first webinar with one of our founding partners, Spaces EDU, coming together with the human intelligence movement to really bring forward new ideas and reimagine what education and learning should look like for an AI world. So I just want to welcome everyone again. My name is Michelle Ament, and I am the co-president of the Human Intelligence Movement. And I want to introduce to you my co-host today, Sierra Holtzheuser, and a little bit about me. I am the co-president, like I said, of the Human Intelligence Movement and the chief academic officer of ProSolve. You can see there on the left, one of the things that gives me so much joy is my family. I have three kids. They're not really kids. They're like young adults. William is 24, Sam is 20, and Maggie is 21. And then I've got Sam's girlfriend Sammy and my husband Brian and my in-laws Ruth and Gary. So we get together a lot as a family, and it's just fun to have that human connection. So I'm excited to be here with everyone today, and I'll turn it over to Sierra to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you for having me. We're so grateful for this partnership that we have with the Human Intelligence Movement. As Michelle said, my name is Sierra Holtzheuser, and I am the VP of Growth and Partnerships at Spaces EDU by My Blueprint. I have always been very passionate about student success, which started in my early career as an elementary educator and has followed me through the last 15 years in educational technology, where I am very fortunate to work with district leaders, school leaders, educators, students, and families to bring the vision of what future success really looks like in K-12 and beyond. Now, the reason that I care so much about this topic is that I have a 5-year-old daughter. This is an older picture, but I love it. It's my two girls, my furry firstborn, and my 5-year-old Harper. And Harper's in kindergarten. And I made a commitment when I had my daughter that I was going to ensure that the education system was built so that our kids could thrive. And with this ever-evolving future, and with even what AI has done in the last year, it's our responsibility to have this conversation. And so I'm very grateful to Michelle for inviting me today, and for all of you for coming so we can have a really wicked conversation about the future of education.
Thanks, Sierra. Well, I want to just kind of set the stage for what to expect over the next hour together. We are going to really dive into why human intelligence for an AI world. What does it mean to be in the intelligence era? We're going to spend some time really understanding what is competency-based assessment and competency-based learning. What does it mean? Why is it important for an intelligence age? And then how do digital portfolios really support us in our work of reimagining learning for this age? And we've got some strategies and tools for you to take away and get started with competency-based learning. So a little bit about the human intelligence movement. So our mission here within this grassroots movement is to ensure that all students have the uniquely human skills or human intelligences that they need to thrive and succeed in our AI world. And as a community, we bring awareness to this topic through events like this, through webinars, through speaking opportunities, through our podcast, just to ensure that everyone is really aware of the need to balance our AI world with human intelligence. And we have a thriving community. Sierra, I picked up on what you said about a wicked conversation because we love to solve wicked problems. And I think that what I really believe that in order to make change in this era, coming together as a community of people, learning from one another and pushing and advocating for change. And that's really the last pillar of the human intelligence movement, is ensuring that we start to reimagine what our system looks like, whether it's at a school level, a district level, or at a state or federal level, and really measuring the skills that matter most. And we're going to dive into that today about assessment and grading, and how do we make sure that we are advocating for those human skills. And when we think about the intelligence age, we have to start by kind of looking at where we've been with education. If we look back, our education system in the past was really built around physical labor, in the sense that you learned through apprenticeship, you learned by doing, and you gathered the skills that you needed for your career. And then the industrial age came along. And in the industrial age, we found machines to do the work that humans were doing, which all of a sudden changed what schooling looked like. And we entered that knowledge age where we were really focused on what knowledge you could acquire so that you could go and apply that knowledge in the workforce. That's really the present era that we are living in now. But we have artificial intelligence. Our AI world is here. And I would argue then that we have moved into a new era called the intelligence era. And this intelligence era has a stronger focus on the need for human intelligence. AI is ubiquitous. We see it and use it each day. And in order to really maximize artificial intelligence, we're going to have to think differently about human intelligence and what the future, I would say today and the future, looks like. So when we think about reimagining education, it's really about how do we focus in on human intelligence, and what does that mean, and how do we ensure that students leave our education system with these strong human intelligence skills. So as we think about the AI world, we know that we've heard this saying that AI is more likely to change a person's job than to take it. And I don't know that that's accurate. Well, let me start over. We've often heard that AI will replace you. And I think that this quote is much more accurate, that it is more likely to change a person's job than actually take it. And if you look at McKinsey's facts here that say 85 million jobs will be displaced by AI, and 97 million new jobs will be created. And what those new jobs will be focused on is needing the human intelligences that I've been talking about. Go ahead, Sarah. So what we know is that employers are prioritizing these human skills that are essential for career readiness. So what are these human skills? Let's talk about the human intelligences. These are some of the skills that the World Economic Forum has named being on the rise, whether it's critical thinking, technology literacy, curiosity, systems thinking, talent management. All of these skills are emerging and continuing to rise. And here at the Human Intelligence Movement, we have identified what are the core skills that are needed for an AI world. And Jenna just dropped our position paper in the chat for you to take a look at. It's really centered around cognitive competencies, social emotional competencies, and adaptability competencies. Our research team has found that these are the three anchor set of skills that are needed for the intelligence age. So let's just go a little bit deeper as we think about what are the cognitive competencies. And these really are go ahead, Sierra. These really are the skills such as critical thinking, creative problem solving, ethical reasoning, decision making, that metacognition, that's that IQ, how we think about our thinking. Then we also think about human intelligences through social emotional competencies. And these are things like emotional intelligence, relationship building, having empathy, really being able to emotionally regulate and know who you are and have self-awareness and self-concept through identity. And then finally, the skill set that we believe is most important right now for an AI world is this adaptability, this idea that we need to be cognitively flexible, that we need to have resilience, that we are learning and unlearning new ideas all the time, and that we do that through an active learning process, which drives motivation both intrinsically and extrinsically. So here's what I'd like to ask all of you is which of the human intelligences do you think are matter the most in the age of AI? So go ahead and take a look at a poll that is coming your way, and I'd love to hear what you think about what matters most. Are we seeing the poll here? Did it come up for everybody? No.
No, just the question.
Okay. So let's do this. Go ahead and drop in.
We have had 19 people respond to it.
Okay. It came up when you first got on. Oh, when you joined. Okay. Okay. That's okay, Jason. I'll have to tell you, like this is my first opportunity to use the poll, so I'm learning just alongside all of you. So it's good to know. Jenna, do you want to go ahead and share the results? All right, so you should be seeing the results of which skill matters most in the age of AI. Let's take a look. We're seeing critical thinking at 37% at the highest. It's very interesting, kind of right below that is ethical decision making. And then we start to see some reflection or metacognition along with empathy and relationship skills. So Sierra, we're seeing a lot of energy. Oh, Vera said, I need an all of the above or a multi-select. It is really challenging, isn't it, to
Absolutely.
just choose the most important because they all really they have unique functions and are needed in different ways. And so as we think about our education system, really, we'd all agree that these skills matter so much in the age of AI. And I'm really curious, Sarah, what are your thoughts on why is it continue to be a struggle to prioritize these skills? What's kind of getting in the way of for educators?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that first and foremost, the skills that we're talking about are really context dependent and subjective. And so it's not easy to standardize or to automate the evaluation of our skill development. I mean, I feel like a pretty great communicator. I'm good in a one-on-one context. But does that mean that I'm really great at communicating with my family members or people I know? Am I great one-on-one with a stranger? What about if it's like a high volatility conversation? Am I good in that context? And so that makes it difficult to assess, right? Skill development's also on a continuum, Michelle, or like a progression, we call them. So our learners able to use these skills consistently and across contexts, and furthermore is one skill at more of that emerging or beginning level and another one more around something I can do consistently. And so how do we assess when we have multiple skills and we're doing them differently? And I shy away from the term mastery when I personally talk about skills, as something will come up in a little bit, but I think it's important to note you can't necessarily, or maybe very few people are like a master of empathy. I saw empathy as one of the skills there, right? Skills decay over time, you use them differently. And so a lot of our traditional assessment is a snapshot in time. And that just doesn't work when we talk about skills. So it's a reframe, it's a new mindset, and it's a way of thinking about assessment that changes when we move toward competency or skill-based from that traditional letter grade on content or knowledge.
Well, and I appreciate all of that because I think one of the things that we talk a lot with the human intelligence movement is the need to hold ourselves accountable to us to measuring these skills. And so just for you to name kind of the complexity in assessment and in measurement, just I think is a timely conversation because if we say these skills are important and we want to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that we are prioritizing them, I think assessment starts to become the lever of change, the most kind of almost the most important thing to be focused on right now in our education system. And so what I want to introduce to everyone is this idea of competency-based education, which I would say, Sarah, you're one of a leading most expert in the field to really be able to share with us about competency-based education. And so we've got another poll just to gauge, and I don't know if y'all saw this poll too already, but it's really around get a sense of how familiar everyone is around with the idea of competency-based assessment or competency-based education. So we've got a live poll. I can see you all coming, adding to it right now. This is fun to see the numbers change in real time here. So just about everyone has participated. And Sierra, it looks like a fair amount of people are familiar. And we've got a couple of people that or it's a first time hearing about it or have heard about it, but don't really know very much. And we've got a couple of people that we could lean on that are experts in the field as well for this conversation. So thanks everybody for just giving us a sense of how much you know about competency-based education. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Sierra, to really give us a little bit more information about how we go about really assessing these skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And it's super exciting when we have, I think, a varied audience, people who are coming in with different skill sets. It lets us know that this conversation is integral and important regardless of your entry point. For me, I think I love a level set at the beginning of most conversations. And so making sure we have more of a common definition or at least something we can reference over the course of the next, 30, 40 minutes together. So first, I want to speak to more of a definition. So competency-based education is a system, and I like the words learner-centered or student-centered. And what we're really moving toward is demonstrated mastery of explicit, measurable, and transferable knowledge and skills. And now this is contrary to more of that traditional system that we referenced earlier, where we're focusing primarily on grades and on seat time and on credits to say that a learner knows something. And when we think about our own educational experience, we all remember getting a really bad grade, and we all remember getting a really good grade. And the motivation came from the grade and not from the learning. And often when I was teaching post-secondary, my kids would ask me, how do I get an A? And that question really drove me mad because I thought at this level of education, perhaps my students are thinking more about learning and the process of learning and growth and applying that into the profession of education. And so when we think about competency-based education, there's a couple key facets, and I have the Aurora Institute, which is now full scale and something that I'm going to it's going to take me a while. I still call it the Sky Dome, so we'll get there eventually. But Aurora is a really great place if we're starting our competency-based work to build an understanding of what it means to have a system where students are empowered to make daily decisions, where assessment is meaningful and positive and empowering for our learners, and that it's timely, relevant, and actionable evidence that we're actually documenting. That our students have differentiated and timely support based on individual needs, that we're thinking about equity, and you can see it's the entry and the exit point of the model from Aurora. When we think about competency-based education, one of the top and best outcomes of doing something in a competency-based way is that it is equitable for learners. It's not giving the exact same, we expect you to sit your bum in this seat, learn the same material, do the same standardized test and get a grade at the end. And so we're having more rigorous common expectations for learning that are very transparent, they're explicit, they're measurable, and they're transferable. And so this model of education is not something that comes lightly or easily. It requires really strong leadership. It requires community buy-in. We want to think critically about these skills and do things in a way that's really interactive and co-constructed. And so it's not something that happens overnight, not to make it sound like negative or something that's impossible to arrive at, because on the positive side of things, we see a ton of states that are changing their graduation requirements, releasing a statewide portrait of a graduate. Even if your state doesn't have a portrait, and I say graduate, and I'm going to use it interchangeably with portrait of a learner, profile of success, vision of a graduate. These are all terms that are used across the country. But we see people removing a lot of standardized traditional measures because they know it no longer suits our students and it does not prepare them for the future. And so there's a lot of exciting shifts and change happening at the policy level. We see districts doing this without the state suggesting that they move the needle on these measures. And so competency-based education is more of that system. But even if your state or your district doesn't have a competency-based system that's in practice right now, it doesn't mean that we can't start moving the needle and reaping some of the rewards of competency-based education, including things like prioritizing competencies and skills. We can do this at the classroom level, absolutely starting tomorrow, and I have some things that I'll share in just a while about that. I think for me, what's really important is competency-based education actually mirrors the fluid and modern workforce. So at work, I'm not doing isolated, individualized, standardized tasks. I'm collaborating with people and with people who have skills that I do not have. And in fact, that's a huge part of the work that I do is I think about people's strengths and I elevate those strengths, especially if they're things that I'm not good at. And so how can our educational system start to do that so that we're preparing learners through hands-on experiences? We are encouraging equity. I've mentioned that. We're thinking about unique and diverse talents and pathways to mastery. And anything that is student-centered has my vote, something that's going to motivate learners because we're focusing on their individual goals and the growth that they are demonstrating. I'll give a little for competency-based education. Now, I noted that if you are not yet in a competency-based system, you can still use competency-based assessment in your practice as an educator. And so I wanted to reference a couple of things here that I think are really important when we're thinking about starting small, which is part of the way that Michelle and I think about making these big changes in our system. And the first thing, I guess, in practical terms is that we can start with some pretty clear performance indicators tied to real world experiences. So what does that mean? It means that we're thinking about really authentic tasks like projects, presentations, portfolios. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, and leveraging those to demonstrate our skills. We're going to think about feedback and reflection, and you're going to hear this a lot from me today. The best way to help learners grow is through a feedback loop. And so if we can have self-reflection based on what we actually know is successful and what it looks like, that we can receive feedback and that we can try again, this is something that is integral to a competency-based assessment model. And as a leader in my company, I'm consistently mentoring people about failing every single day. And for us type A perfectionists in the room, and I know there's a few of us, that feels uncomfortable and it feels messy. But we're talking about innovation and we're talking about future readiness. And if you're not failing every day, you're definitely not learning and able to innovate at the same, depth as somebody who's comfortable with failing, who can recognize what they did wrong and who can iterate and try again. And a huge principle of competency-based education is that you can try again, that it's not one test, that's your score, and you're done. And the last thing I want to note, and I'm going to have you put in the chat if this is something you're thinking about, the role of the educator shifts a bit with competency-based education. So we're thinking more of the educator as a coach and as a collaborator. And so if you are operating as a coach or collaborator today, put that word right in the chat, commit to it. I'm a coach, I'm a collaborator. We think about co-constructing things with our learners and with our communities and with other educators. And this is a big shift in our competency-based world. Certainly some people operated that way in a traditional model. But because we're not so focused on teaching to the test or teaching specific knowledge, because we just don't need it in an AI-driven world, we are able to co-construct with our learners what types of experiences they want to have and how they're going to demonstrate skills in those experiences. So do we have any coaches and collaborators in the group?
It looks like we do have some coaches and some collaborators.
Love it. Danelle, you're absolutely a coach and collaborator and someone I reference and look to all the time for how to do it best. Awesome. Love to see it.
Yeah, I think, Sierra, what you talked about around identity is really huge. And I know we've got some superintendents, some educational leaders, as well as designers and teachers here in the space. I think that really spoke to me because I think as we move into the intelligence age, our identity as educators shifts from being the disseminator of information or knowledge to creating the experiences. And so what you're offering for us is a starting place to begin to create experiences where students can show you what they know, their performance in a real or authentic context. So that's a very different approach to really seeing what students know and are able to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, identity is a huge through line, especially with digital portfolios. When we start getting into documenting experiences and reflecting, this is a huge piece of self-awareness, self-discovery, and learning through process over product. And we'll get a chance to see what that can look like.
Terrific.
So I have this, I think, and I was talking to a very good friend yesterday, and we were talking about the end goal and start with the end in mind. And so I thought about what that means to me. And the end goal here for me personally is that I'm going to help students develop the skills that they need to be successful, these human intelligences that we're talking about. I'm going to ensure that they can use these skills consistently and across context. And I know you're going to hear me say that quite a bit today, but I think this is the true measure of skill documentation, development, reflection, feedback, and growth. And finally, I want to ensure that students have a living record that demonstrates what they know and can do. And that was just Michelle's like perfect connection to what you just noted. So if you agree and you're here for the same reason, let's type end goal into the chat. We're here to make sure students have the skills, they can use them consistently and across contexts, and that they have a living record so that they can do things like apply to scholarships and apply to post-secondary and leverage them in the workforce and get an internship. So thinking, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
I was just saying how like empowering to think about a living record. Like I can show you who I am as a human that isn't just a GPA score. Like my GPA of you guys want it was like 3, I don't even know. I don't even know what it was, like 3.75 or something. Like that didn't define who I was as a student, but yet it was the mark I carried forward after graduation. So that's exciting to me to empower them with a living record. Yeah, Arvin, I probably did have a 4.0.
I did not. I
No,
did not.
I did not either, but that doesn't mean we're any less, right? But like there is that ranking and sorting of students based on a number and a score, which is very different than the strengths that you bring to whatever problem you're solving and whatever workforce or situation you're in. So I'll
Absolutely.
digress. Don't get Arvin and I going. Like, look, here we go. That's for tomorrow night, Michael. We can tackle some of these unscripted conversations. Oh, look, yeah, fireworks are going off already. So, okay,
Oh, I
back
can't
to
wait.
you, Sierra.
I love it. And I think what you just said is so important, um, because what we assess as educators is what students believe matters most. And so if at the end of the day, we're still talking about GPA and grades, that's when the learners are going to say, how do I get an A? And when we're talking about skill development and we're assessing real competencies, we're letting learners know this is what does in fact matter. And it's why I'm obsessed with the portrait of a graduate and how it can roll out to be really meaningful for a learner to see these are the things that I'm going to demonstrate across my whole school experience and outside of school, because we know so much learning happens outside of the classroom. So I'm thinking of my time here, and I'm going to go rather quickly through the next few slides so we can get into some portfolio examples. As a district or community, though, there are 4 elements of building a foundation for competency-based assessment that are worth noting. The first is that shared competency language. So if that's your district portrait of a graduate, it's letting your community co-construct and roll out the competencies we believe our K-12 learners should develop and use consistently across K-12 and beyond so that they can be successful. Next, we want to think about the learning experiences that we have and how we can frame them as evidence. So this to me is authentic projects, challenges. I see fantastic hands-on learning experiences, collaborative projects with design thinking in mind that are happening across K-12 classrooms. And these are how our learning can have authentic connections to competencies. As a district or school, really promoting feedback over grades so you can help with that rubric alignment and thinking about how a competency connects to standards or what we're teaching in various courses if you're still in more of a traditional school system than a fully competency-based, mastery-based system. And my last note is around licensing tools that are purpose-built. I don't think that it's a requirement to have a digital tool, but I've seen firsthand the value of being able to quickly, easily reference your feedback, your reflections, and actually see in multimedia your evidence of growth over time. And so we'll dive in a little bit to what a framework can look like. This framework is from Redesign. It's something that I reference quite frequently in my work and is something that is a free resource, and we're happy to share after the webinar.
Sierra, Katie Elliott on the call today did some work on this framework, contributed to it. So a little shout out to Katie.
Yeah,
She already
I was
mentioned
involved in promoting it.
promoting it. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
yeah,
already mentioned it earlier in the
yeah. So I
chat.
put the link in the chat. Yeah,
Oh, thanks, Katie. That's
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely.
I was just on a call with Antonia this week, and I was like, which resources do you think are the best
Yeah,
for us
that's
to share?
awesome. Yeah.
And so when we're thinking about some of those people who are brand new to competency-based work, I'd say start really small. And there's 2 ways to have an entry point. The first is that you pick the competency. So what's something that you're most comfortable with? What fits with your teaching or the subject area that you teach really nicely? If you're in science, maybe problem solving or critical thinking has such a clear connection for you. Or from a learner-centered lens, what's the skill that my learners most need to practice? And once you've picked that one competency, that can be your jumping off point. If you're more comfortable, you can start with step 2 and start with a learning experience that you have, a project that you've created, and then think about which competency fits best into that learning experience. So you can go either way. If you're just beginning to look at competencies and you're getting to that step 2, just start thinking about deconstructing the competency itself. Consider those component skills that exist within a competency are kind of nested within a broader competency. And think about how you can adapt your lesson, where if you're getting more intermediate or expert, this is really where you're designing full projects or performance tasks. You might be connecting one or more competencies. This is really going to demonstrate that mastery over time. And so you need to build into your plan and your instruction opportunities to practice. And as I noted earlier, to fail and to iterate and try again. A huge part is considering performance levels and rubrics. This could be an entire series or year-long work PD with educators, so I'm not going to go too in depth today. But if you know that your learners are, showcasing between a level 2 and 4 are on the learning progression for your competency, pull that out. Think about using I can statements as indicators so learners can understand what it means to demonstrate a level 2 in that skill or competency. And then they can reflect using those same words. There's so much power there in having the learner know exactly what expectation is, what it looks like once they demonstrate evidence, using that same rubric to self-assess or to give peer feedback. That's another model we love to see at Spaces EDU. And I think there's a huge part here that we often need to discuss, which is the explicit teaching of skills. And so for one, from a district lens to educator, not every educator is going to be skillful in every single competency in your framework. So having them have opportunities to practice and even document in their own digital portfolio, and then having direct teaching, and as I noted, opportunities to practice and fail as a learner and iterate and try again. And the feedback loop works really well in there. My final note is sharing. If we're not already doing something like a student-led conference or a defense of learning, these are huge opportunities for learner agency, developing voice and choice, having that metacognition piece, documenting goals and showcasing progress. There's so much that can be done in that student-led conference. And so having the sharing piece as part of your model is something I would absolutely recommend when we're thinking about this from the classroom. Feedback is the breakfast of champions. Yes, I love this.
So as you've had a chance to really kind of get an overview of competency-based assessment and competency-based learning, here's what I would love to have us weigh in on is what is the biggest challenge that you found to assessing these human intelligences? So let's fill the chat with some of the barriers or challenges so we can start to look forward to how do we overcome some of these and solve these wicked problems.
Absolutely.
We're starting to see some of these come in. I'm really curious, Michael, when you say the unintentional I hope barrier, can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So I'm a superintendent of schools, so I am the system, and something that I've tried to do my whole career and continue to try to do is fight against the parts of the system that I didn't create, but if I don't help change, I'm unintentionally perpetuating. So it's more of that macro, like part of the system has subjective and biased assessments, for example. So part of my mission or my job is to break down those barriers that were created at some point that keep people out or keep children from realizing that everyone believes in them. And in addition to the feedback that Hattie talks about, it's also that efficacy, that collective belief. So it's knowing and identifying that structures that exist around us have created problems. And I hope that we can acknowledge that and then build a coalition to break those walls down and then create new structures.
Thank you so much for elaborating. We've got some other ideas around that not teacher isn't the only one that can give feedback, peer-to-peer feedback or other mentors or adults giving feedback to students. So that's powerful. So again, mindset work. we've got some things around the ideas that maybe we're too focused in on what students need to know versus bigger brushstrokes around the demonstration of understanding. So again, like that, the just even not knowing how to measure these skills and overcome them. Oh, this is a great one, Rachel, around adults struggling to trust students with their own learning. Like that, again, that identity that the adult is the smartest person in the room and should be the keeper of the information or the knowledge. So undoing some of that. So we've got some things, some challenges to overcome, Sierra. And I'm curious in all of your work around competency-based education, what are some of maybe the ways or the techniques that you've seen educators start to overcome some of these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it in the first slide, Michelle, when you talked about community, and it came up here as well, this idea of a coalition. We can't make sweeping shifts just alone. It's nice to be able to first and foremost commiserate a bit and to speak to maybe even some of the structures we like and feel very comfortable with. And I often hear from family members like, the system was good enough for me, why change it? And it's not just family members who feel that way. And a lot of teachers feel very good at their roles. And so you mentioned identity too. I think the idea of community gives us a space to be uncomfortable and to share what's going to be difficult, to problem solve collaboratively. It's literally this topic in a nutshell, is how can you build and demonstrate these skills, and doing it with your community is going to make it a lot easier. I think for me, and something I always did in my own classroom, was I told kids I didn't know what I was doing when I didn't know what I was doing. And that's something, again, as a teacher, that can feel difficult. But I would say, this is my first time trying this. We're going to make some mistakes. It's going to get messy. And by just prefacing the work with the fact that it's not going to be perfect is, I think, another piece of expectation setting. Is we're learning this together. It's new. It's not meant to be perfect. And so co-constructing with our learners is a big part of this puzzle. And somebody noted that we don't always have the best resources and examples. And that's absolutely something that Michelle and I can share after the course of this webinar specifically, but after the conversation itself, is what are the types of resources that really help us? And I have a lot that drill very specifically down and with examples. We just unfortunately didn't have time to get into them all today. But yeah, that's what I'd say. It's a community thing, it's a mindset shift. And so we have to get uncomfortable. We have to be comfortable with the discomfort of it all. And of course, the buy-in piece. And as Michael noted, when you are in that superintendent role, you have to essentially decide on the North Star, and you have to be able to be comfortable with strategy and vision. And then you also have to have that buy-in from your community. And so when we think about the community aspect, not just as a how do we do this as teachers, but broadly, even the competency framework itself, what competencies do we want our learners to develop? That might vary community to community. And having that buy-in up front means you don't have to garner it later when you're trying to get buy-in for, let's use a digital portfolio, for example. Learning to trust your students. I love this. And clarity of focus, shared leadership are always priority number one. Danelle coming in with the truth bombs. Love it. Okay. So we have about 15 minutes left together. So we're going to talk a bit about digital portfolios. I was a portfolio user before digital portfolios existed. In my classroom, we threw out grades, and I had my learners document evidence of growth because I could see that they were not enjoying education anymore. And I'm a very joyful person, if you can't tell, and operating a joyless classroom really just took it out of me. And when I thought critically about what was demotivating my learners, it was grades. And so by throwing them out, focusing on inquiry, having that co-construction every single morning where I would say, I don't know to them, and then having them document evidence of what they were good at, where they wanted to grow and do student-led conferencing, was something I did over 15 years ago. And so I know the value of documentation, of having that learning become visible. by having the feedback tied directly to the evidence of learning, to that process, so that we can connect the feedback around strengths and where we need to go to the evidence that we've demonstrated, to have that loop happen in one place and to be able to see the growth over the course of the year, but even K to 12 and beyond. And so digital portfolios are really powerful for that learning journey. What's my story? We talked about identity. It increases that engagement and agency. It allows for that personalization. How am I going to choose to represent my learning? Which multimedia represents me best, or even how I'm feeling today? And I think for me, school is time-based, and we know that right now, but learning isn't. It's happening everywhere. And so by having a digital portfolio that, is in your pocket, in your phone, you have your app and you can easily document your learning that's happening in and outside of the classroom, allows those greatest moments that really become foundational to who we are to be represented in a place that my educators can access and that I can share externally, either K-12 or when I'm done. And so we're going to dive in to what makes portfolios uniquely powerful. I have a student example I'm going to dive into, and I also have a work colleague on the call who's keeping me in time. And so if I take too long, Colleen, give me the nudge. But here I am, I'm in my own portfolio. I've actually taken some real student examples, but putting it in my portfolio meant I didn't have to share their names. What you could see here on the left is that these are my competencies. This is the framework my district or my state has represented. It's being created for me. So as an educator, I don't have the lift. Nobody mentioned time as one of the challenges, but competency-based education feels like it will take more time. Personalizing education feels like a big lift. But when we see it in action, and it's something that's easily created for us and learner-centered, we do get to reimagine our role as the educator. So in my portfolio, I have evidence. You can see one collaboration artifact, one where I'm an engaged citizen, one where I'm an empowered learner. And you can see, hello, my dog is coming to visit me. And you can see here that I have a specific piece of evidence where I built a website for a nonprofit. This was part of my P-Tech program. And I have 5 unique pieces of multimedia, and I've reflected using a rubric on this skill development. Now, documenting evidence of learning in any digital tool should be very user-friendly for the learner. This is a K-12 product, and so we want to be thoughtful of how the documentation occurs and how easy we can make it for our learners. I started an artifact here around a poetry and voice contest that I participated in. And you can see here my reflection speaks to the fact that I actually don't like poetry. And so I've made a goal for myself in my digital portfolio. I've mapped out 4 ideas for how I'm going to achieve my goal. And I have a note for my evidence of success. And for those asking in the chat, the tool that I'm in right now is called Spaces EDU. Once I'm ready to post, I'm actually going to ensure that I've thought about which competency this represents. And so I'm reinforcing the competency framework and language of my district or my state. In this case, it's being an effective communicator, but I also think that it's part of my own unique defense of learning, which is going to be the presentation I do at the end of the year to showcase these competencies to my community. And I'm going to click post. Now, as we know, any type of social media is going to have this very similar feel and flow. And so when we create technology and when we leverage technology in the classroom, we want to make sure that it's easy for the user so that we don't have so much troubleshooting and teaching on the tech side of things. Because as we noted, we're explicitly teaching all the skills. Now in Spaces EDU, some of the things that are really impactful and important that are worth noting is as an educator, I can easily come in and comment on my learner. That's providing my feedback in the same multimedia options that my learner can use to demonstrate their process of learning leading up into their products. We have 2 share functionalities, which again, sharing was a key part of this work. So learners can easily generate a share URL, which is a very safe, secure, can't be searched on Google URL of the portfolio, essentially creating a website that can be appended to a scholarship, a post-secondary, a workforce application. And learners also have their presentation mode, and this is where they can curate their artifacts of learning into a presentation. I can, let's say, curate or archive evidence of learning over 3 years. Some of our partners use grade bands when they're talking about their competencies. And so at the end of grade 8, I might do a presentation. This would allow me to pick and choose which artifacts I'd like to present, order them, and have a full presentation with one click versus having to switch tools to present. And what does this look like with some of our real
after they
learners?
graduate
Can we
is
hear
super
this?
important.
Last year, during our spring showcase, one of our students that was piloting Space's portfolio had their portfolio displayed during showcase. And he was just like so proud to be able to show multiple pieces of work digitally and then have the physical work samples as well. So people could see step 1, step 2, step 3 on the screen while they're looking at the final product on the table.
What I really like is being able to just have that organization and being able to see like, oh, this was my first one, this was my second one. Here's some spare details that go into this that I did. And for able to me and my teachers to see like just that process and know like I did this work.
Spaces has changed the way that we document student learning because it gives us a platform now where students can document and archive their work that the instructors can also engage with and then leave feedback. And that's kind of the hard part about the iteration cycle and the documenting of the process cycle is that a lot of that feedback just happens verbally for the students. So it's hard to capture that. So to be able to do it in a platform where the student can see it and the staff can also see it, it makes things more manageable and it makes it more meaningful and impactful for the student. We like to say student-centered education and students need autonomy and agency. Those are fun things to say and hard things to do. And it's a tool that really makes that possible. Again, regardless of your model, if you're really serious about kids and their work and the reflections on their work being in the center, I haven't seen a better tool.
I love that quote, fun things to say and hard things to do. I think about the idea of it's pretty easy to kind of be back and forth with buzzwords a lot. I think everything he said, I probably say on a daily basis, student driven, authentic, real world, and passion based, all of those things. And then to be reminded that that's hard to do was great. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last thing, and we're hopeful that regardless of the digital portfolio you use, that you have opportunities as an educator. And thinking about, and I've lost my speaker notes, give me 1 second here, but the goal of any digital tool is hopefully that you have those student-centered components, but then they're layered in with the educator pieces so that you can easily tag evidence of learning with the skills or with the standards that you are actually assessing, do it right onto the artifacts, and then be able to see as an educator your coverage of those standards. And so where are the gaps? Where do I need to reteach? And then more importantly, within an individual learner, what does that growth look like over time? And so once we tag artifacts, you can very easily filter down to see the growth of our learners in the same digital tool that they're leveraging to do those applications and to see, make visible their learning and growth over time. And at the end of the day, of course, the most important thing is that our learners see their value, they can articulate who they know and what they can do, and that they can leverage that body of work. So we're getting down to the end. I have a couple notes here. I'm just going to say 2 things for each audience member. The first is that I want you to start small. I know that this feels gigantic and enormous, and it can be these sweeping transformational shifts. But if we want to think critically about how to navigate the starting off point, as an educator, I said pick one competency. As a district, I do think we really need to start with that vision and that North Star alignment. What's the competency language? What are we hoping to develop in our learners? And making sure every stakeholder understands our why. So maybe that one's not starting so small. And my other note is just around making failure part of your culture. I think so often we're working toward this perfectionist mindset or getting things right. And if we can actually have our educators and our learners feel comfortable with the messy, we're going to get a lot more out of these competency-based models. So Michelle, I'll pass it over to you to speak to some of these tools to get started.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sierra, for all that wealth of information. I think, one of the things that is really important is that starting small. And so we've got a tool for you today around really a reflection tool to get you started on how to measure human intelligence. And it really starts with that mindset shift, really evaluating as an organization or as a team, what kind of where are you with mindset? What are the skills that you value? What are the strategies you have in place? And then from this reflection tool, what is one thing that you can do differently this year? Because solving this wicked problem is going to take not only a community, as we've talked about, but steps along the way. And so it may not be going from we have a traditional assessment system to now we have a competency-based portfolio, but there's things to do along the way. And so our goal is that this tool helps you to kind of figure out what is that next step to take. So next, I want to just share with you another resource, two things here. One is a feedback survey. We would love to have you take 2 minutes right now. Give us some feedback on today's webinar. This is a first experience for us at the Human Intelligence Movement and bringing in our partner Spaces EDU. So I'm very interested in your thoughts around this as a community, and what we did well and what we could improve for next time. So give us a little bit of feedback. I'll stop talking so you can grab that link and drop a couple of ideas in it.
And we'll follow up with these resources after the fact so that you'll have an opportunity to click into them there as well. That high position paper is awesome. There's a digital portfolio guide, and so some helpful content there. And as I noted, I'll put together some of those resources I mentioned earlier, some from Redesign, some from some other great places where you can find free access and make this really easy for ourselves.
So Jenna just dropped the link to that tool in the chat, and additionally reach out to Sierra or myself. If you are not a member of the Human Intelligence Movement, I really welcome you to join us. There's a link there. So as we wrap things up, any questions that anyone has for Sierra or myself today? Look at Michael. He's throwing us confetti.
I'll see you tomorrow, everybody. I'm going to run to another meeting. This was really fun. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks
Michael.
for coming.
So our time together, we've really explored why our system is outdated as we exit the knowledge era and are fully in the intelligence era. We need to be measuring what matters, which are our human skills, our human intelligences. And so thank you, Sierra, for showing us how we can do that through portfolios and through competency-based assessment. So we welcome everyone, or we thank everyone for joining. And we just appreciate your time today, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and working together.
Amazing.
Thanks,
And thank you,
everybody.
Michelle. Working with the Human Intelligence Movement is such a rewarding part of my work. We feel so grateful for you, and we've seen such tremendous growth in such a small team who has such a big mission and a big idea. It's pretty exciting and inspiring to watch. So thanks for your partnership and for inviting us today. We're so grateful.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.